I and Lily, 31, and I stood outside the elegant beachfront resort, watching through binoculars as chaos erupted at my father's wedding reception. The bride, only 7 years older than me, was holding a piece of paper in trembling hands, while my father's face drained of all color. Guests whispered among themselves as security escorted a confused 5-year-old boy and his mother through the crowd. The child looked exactly like my dad, down to the distinctive cleft chin and amber eyes that run in our family. I hadn't planned to witness the fallout in person, but something compelled me to drive 3 hours to see the explosion I had carefully engineered. As my father frantically tried to explain to his new bride why a DNA test confirming his secret child had arrived in a gift-wrapped box during their reception, I finally felt the weight of 10 years of abandonment lifting from my shoulders. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The story of how I came to destroy my father's wedding day begins, like most tales of family dysfunction, with a series of small betrayals that accumulated over time. Growing up, my dad, Rick, was my hero, the center of my universe. He coached my soccer team, helped with science projects, and taught me to change the oil in my first car. We had the kind of relationship other daughters envied, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. At least, that's what I believed until I turned 21. I remember the day everything changed with painful clarity. It was my college graduation, May 15th, a perfect spring day with just enough breeze to keep the ceremonies from becoming unbearably hot. My mom had driven separately because they had been divorced for 3 years by then, maintaining a civil relationship for my sake. I scanned the audience before walking across the stage, spotting Mom's familiar wave, but Dad's seat remained conspicuously empty. No calls, no texts, no explanation. Just absence where support should have been. That night, while my friends celebrated with their families, I sat in my dorm room repeatedly calling his number. When he finally answered, his voice was different, distant in a way I'd never heard before. "Lily, I'm sorry about today," he said, ambient noise suggesting he was at a bar or restaurant. "Something came up that I couldn't get out of." "What could possibly be more important than my graduation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt bubbling beneath the surface. There was a pause, then a woman's laughter in the background. "It's complicated, sweetheart. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll have dinner next week, okay?" That dinner never happened. Neither did the 4th of July barbecue he promised to host, nor the birthday lunch that had been our tradition since I was old enough to sit at a restaurant table. Each cancellation came with increasingly flimsy excuses. Each promised rain check never materialized. Eventually, I stopped receiving even those hollow assurances and started seeing the truth of my situation through social media. Where mutual friends occasionally tagged him in photos, always with the same woman, Vanessa, with her perfect blonde hair and practiced smile. She was 29 to his 48, a yoga instructor he had apparently met at the gym 6 months before my graduation. According to my mother, who maintained minimal contact with Dad's sister, he had become completely infatuated, abandoning his former life to revolve entirely around Vanessa and her wellness-centered social circle. "Your father is having a midlife crisis," Mom explained over one of our monthly dinners, her tone more resigned than bitter. "Some men buy sports cars, others climb mountains. Rick has decided to pretend he's 30 again with a woman barely older than his daughter." I tried not to judge his new relationship, even as the distance between us grew from a crack to a chasm. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, occasional texts asking how he was doing. The responses, when they came at all, were brief and impersonal. After 2 years of this emotional drought, I made one final attempt at reconciliation, inviting him to coffee at the neutral territory of a cafe downtown. He showed up 30 minutes late, constantly checking his phone, his attention fractured and fleeting. When I asked directly why he had essentially disappeared from my life, his answer hollowed me out completely. "I'm just in a different phase now, Lily," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Vanessa and I are building something new together, and sometimes that means focusing on the future instead of staying tied to the past. The past. That's what I had become to him. A remnant of the life he no longer wanted, as easily discarded as the wedding ring he had once worn. I left that cafe understanding that the father I had known was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who could categorize his only child as part of a dispensable past. I stopped reaching out after Bra. Deleted him from my social media, stopped asking Mom for updates, packed away photo albums and childhood mementos. I built my own life with deliberate independence, completing my master's degree in library science, securing a position at a university archive, making friends who knew nothing of the father-shaped hole in my tkon. History. For 5 years, I existed in a parallel universe where Rick had never been central to my story. Then came the wedding invitation. Except it wasn't an invitation at all, but a text message from my aunt, Dad's sister, who had always maintained a relationship with me despite the awkwardness of the situation. "Just thought you should know," she wrote. "Your dad and Vanessa are getting married next month at Seaside Resort. Didn't want you to hear it from someone else." I stared at those words until my phone screen went dark, then light again as a follow-up message arrived. "He's not inviting any family except me and Uncle Dave. Says they want to keep it intimate. I'm sorry, Lily." Something cracked inside me that day, a final fracture in whatever remaining attachment I had preserved. My father was getting married, and I, his only child, wasn't even worth the courtesy of a personal notification, let alone an invitation. The careful neutrality I had maintained toward him and Vanessa dissolved into a caustic resentment that burned through my practiced indifference. I thanked my aunt for letting me know, asked for the specific date and location details with a casualness that belied my churning emotions, then spent the night alternating between tears and a cold, calculating anger I had never experienced before. By morning, exhausted but strangely clear-headed, I knew I wouldn't simply accept this final dismissal. If my father wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I would remind him and his new bride that reality couldn't be selectively edited to suit their preferred narrative. The opportunity presented itself through an unlikely source: my job at the university archives. Among the collections I managed was a set of alumni records dating back decades, including those from my father's graduating class. One slow afternoon, driven by a curiosity I couldn't quite name, I pulled his file, reviewing the faded transcript and alumni update forms. There, in a questionnaire from 5 years ago, was a detail that caught my attention. He had checked yes to participating in a university genetic research study, part of a campus-wide initiative collecting DNA samples from alumni to study hereditary traits and disease markers. The research database wasn't directly accessible through the archives, but I knew someone who could help navigate that particular ethical gray area. Dr. Patel, a genetics professor who frequently used our archives for her historical research, had become a friend over countless lunch breaks, discussing everything from medieval manuscripts to modern Nanyar. Genetic privacy concerns. "This is highly irregular, Lily," she said when I explained what I was looking for, carefully omitting my true motivations. "The database is supposed to be anonymized for research purposes only." "I understand," I replied, constructing a half-truth that felt plausible. "But there's some family medical history I need to verify, and Dad's been, well, unreachable for years. The study results might help clarify some concerns I have." Whether she believed me or simply pitied the situation, Dr. Patel eventually agreed to run a discreet search, not for medical information, but for something potentially more valuable: genetic matches within the database that might indicate unknown familial relationships. 2 weeks later, she called me to her office after hours, closing the door with unusual care. "I found something," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "A significant genetic match to your father that isn't you or any known relative. The timestamps indicate the sample was submitted about 4 years ago, by someone named Mariana Torres, who participated in a poor follow-up study. My hand trembled slightly as I opened the folder. Inside was a clinical report detailing genetic markers consistent with a parent-child relationship between Richard Lawson, my father, and an individual identified only by a participant number. Attached was a contact form listing Mariana Torres, age 32, and her consent to be contacted for future studies. "What exactly does this mean?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Doctor." Patel removed her glasses, polishing them unnecessarily. "Statistically speaking, it indicates your father has another biological child, one who would be approximately 5 years old now, given when Ms. Torres participated in the study. 5 years ago, while he was with Vanessa." The timeline aligned perfectly with his final withdrawal from my life, that coffee shop conversation where he spoke of focusing on the future. A future that apparently included a secret child he had never acknowledged with a woman who wasn't his girlfriend. I thanked Dr. Patel, promised absolute discretion about her assistance, and took the folder home, where I spent hours staring at the clinical language that confirmed what felt like the ultimate betrayal. Not just of me, but of Vanessa too, though I could spare little sympathy for the woman who had happily replaced me in my father's affections. Finding Mariana Torres proved surprisingly simple. The contact information in the study was outdated, but social media and public records filled in the gaps. She lived just 40 miles away, worked as a dental hygienist, and based on her photos, had a young son with familiar amber eyes and a distinctive cleft chin, features that had defined Lawson men for generations. I debated my next move carefully. I could contact Mariana directly, compare notes about the man who had abandoned us both in different ways. I could confront my father, force him to acknowledge his hypocrisy. Or I could do something that would ensure the truth emerged in a way he couldn't control or dismiss, something that would make him feel a fraction of the pain and humiliation I had endured. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Plenty of time to execute the plan forming in my mind. My first step was to contact Mariana under the guise of conducting follow-up research for the university study. We met at a cafe near her workplace, her son, Lucas, occupied with a coloring book at the table. "I'm not sure what more information I can provide," she said, clearly puzzled by the meeting. The study was years ago, just a cheek swab during a campus health fair when I was finishing my dental program. "We're exploring some unexpected findings," I explained, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Particularly related to hereditary markers that might be relevant to your son's health." At the mention of her child, Mariana's demeanor changed, maternal concern overtaking confusion. "Is there something wrong with Lucas? Something genetic?" "Not wrong, exactly," I assured her. "But we've identified a potential biological relative through the database who might share important health information. Someone who participated in an earlier phase of the study." "Lucas's father?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Because I already know who he is, even if he doesn't acknowledge it." The directness surprised me. "You do?" Mariana nodded, glancing at her son who remained absorbed in his coloring. "Rick Lawson. We had a brief relationship, if you can call it that, when I was interning at the same company as his girlfriend. He said they were on a break." She laughed without humor. "Classic line, right? By the time I discovered I was pregnant, he had blocked my number and transferred to a different department, made it very clear through a lawyer that he wanted no involvement, though he does pay child support after we established paternity legally." The confirmation sent a wave of nausea through me. Not only had my father abandoned me for his new life, but he had cheated on Vanessa, fathered a child he refused to acknowledge, and was now preparing to marry her without ever revealing this significant secret. "I'm sorry," I said, the words inadequate but sincere. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Mariana shrugged, a gesture that failed to mask old hurt. "We've built a good life, Lucas and I. He's a wonderful boy, smart and kind. Rick's loss, honestly. Looking at Lucas, I saw reflections of my own childhood photos. The same determined concentration as he carefully stayed within the lines of his drawing. My half-brother, a relationship neither of us had been allowed to know. What if, I said carefully, there was a way for Rick to acknowledge Lucas publicly? Not necessarily for financial reasons, but for Lucas to know his father, maybe have a relationship with him? We moved past that hope, Mariana replied, though something in her expression suggested the wound remained unhealed. Lucas asks sometimes, but I've explained that some daddies aren't ready to be fathers. Better than telling him his father simply doesn't want him. What if he didn't have a choice about acknowledgement? I pressed. What if the truth came out in the way he couldn't ignore? Mariana studied me with new suspicion. Who are you really? This doesn't sound like university research anymore. The moment had come for honesty, at least partial honesty. My name is Lily Lawson. Rick is my father. He abandoned me too, just in a different way. Her eyes widened, gaze flickering between my face and Lucas's, perhaps seeing the family resemblance she had never had context to recognize before. You're his daughter? The one from his first marriage? I nodded. He's getting married again next month. To Vanessa, the girlfriend he was supposedly on a break from when he met you. Neither of us was invited to the wedding. Understanding dawned in her expression, followed quickly by wariness. And you want to, what, crash it? Create a scene? Use Lucas as some kind of revenge prop? Not exactly, I said, though the denial felt hollow given my evolving plan. But I do think Vanessa deserves to know the truth before she marries him. And I think Lucas deserves recognition as his son. Don't you? Don't you? We talked for another hour, my original deception gradually giving way to a strange, tentative alliance built on shared abandonment. Mariana was understandably protective of Lucas, reluctant to expose him to potential rejection or emotional complications. But she also carried her own resentment toward my father, her own desire for acknowledgement of the truth he had so carefully hidden. By the time Lee parted, we had reached an understanding, if not a fully formed plan. Mariana agreed to provide a copy of Lucas's official paternity test, already conducted years earlier for the child support arrangement. In exchange, I promised that whatever happened, I would ensure Lucas remained protected from any direct confrontation or public spectacle. The next phase required precise timing and the cultivation of specific connections. Through social media reconnaissance and strategic conversations with my aunt, I pieced together details about the upcoming wedding. 60 guests, mostly Vanessa's friends and yoga clients, with a handful of my father's business associates. A beachfront ceremony at 4 in the afternoon, followed by a reception in the resort's glass-walled pavilion. Wedding gifts to be delivered to a designated table in the reception area. The venue's website featured their wedding packages prominently, including the name of their exclusive event coordinator, Diane Mercer. A few calls later, presenting myself as a close friend of the bride who would be arriving late due to a work commitment, I had established enough rapport with Diane to ensure my special delivery would be handled exactly as instructed. The gift is somewhat fragile, I explained during our final conversation. It needs to be presented during the reception toasts, as it's meant to accompany my speech, which another friend will be reading on my behalf. No problem at all, Diane assured me. We handle special presentation requests all the time. Just make sure it's clearly marked with the couple's names and your instructions when you send it. The packet I prepared was deceptively simple. A medium-sized gift box wrapped in silver paper, topped with an elegant bow. Inside, nested in tissue paper, was an envelope containing Lucas's paternity test results, a recent photo of him clearly displaying his Lawson features, and a brief note. Before you begin your new life together, you should know about the child Rick has been hiding from everyone, including you. Married life shouldn't start with secrets this big. I addressed the package to Vanessa Rick Lawson, to be opened during reception toasts, and arranged for timed delivery to the resort on the wedding day. The final piece was ensuring someone would actually open it at the right moment. For this, I needed an unwitting accomplice inside the event. Again, my aunt provided the solution without realizing it. During one of our regular calls, she mentioned that Vanessa's maid of honor, Chelsea, was apparently obsessed with making everything Instagram perfect and had been put in charge of organizing the reception activities, including coordinating toasts and presentations. Finding Chelsea online took minutes. Contacting her required more finesse, but a carefully constructed message expressing regret at missing the wedding due to an unavoidable work crisis overseas, and requesting her help with ensuring my special surprise gift was incorporated into the celebration yielded enthusiastic agreement. "OMG, yes," she replied. "V will be so touched you thought of them even though you couldn't make it. Don't worry, I'll make sure your gift gets its moment during the toasts. So thoughtful of you to arrange something special." Little did she know just how special it would be. As the wedding day approached, I experienced moments of doubt and hesitation. Was I taking this too far? Would exposing my father's secret child actually accomplish anything beyond creating chaos? Did Vanessa, regardless of her role in his abandonment of me, deserve public humiliation on what should be a joyful day? But each time these questions surfaced, I reminded myself of the casual cruelty with which he had discarded me from his life. The missed graduation. The broken promises. The coffee shop conversation where he relegated me to his past. The wedding to which his own daughter wasn't even invited. And finally, the existence of Lucas, the half-brother I had never been allowed to know, the child my father had conceived while supposedly committed to Vanessa, then abandoned financially, but not ethically. No, I decided. They had both made their choices, constructed their perfect narrative while excluding inconvenient truths. The consequences of those choices were long overdue. The wedding day arrived with picture-perfect weather, exactly the kind of sunny, mild day that outdoor venue coordinators dream about. Though I had planned to experience the aftermath remotely, through inevitable social media fallout and my aunt's reports, an irresistible compulsion drove me to the coastal town where the seaside resort perched on its poured scenic bluff. I checked into a motel 3 miles from the venue, changed into nondescript clothing, and drove to a public beach access point that offered a distant view of the resort's ceremony area. With binoculars purchased from a tourist shop, I watched as chairs were arranged in neat rows facing the ocean, an archway decorated with flowers installed at the focal point. Guests began arriving around 3:30, colorful summer dresses and light suits creating a festive atmosphere against the backdrop of sand and sea. From my vantage point, I couldn't distinguish individuals clearly, but I recognized my aunt's distinctive red hair as she and my uncle were seated near the front, the only family representatives deemed worthy of inclusion in my father's intimate celebration. The ceremony proceeded with predictable elegance. Vanessa, a slender figure in white, walked toward my father, who stood stiffly in what appeared to be a light gray suit. Vows were exchanged, rings presented, a kiss shared as guests applauded. Nothing to indicate the disruption that awaited them just hours later. As the wedding party moved to the glass pavilion for the reception, I relocated to a closer observation point, a restaurant patio adjacent to the resort property. From here, ordering an overpriced salad to justify my presence, I had a clear view into the pavilion where tables were arranged around a dance floor, a gift table positioned prominently near the entrance. I watched as my package was delivered by resort staff, placed among the other presents without special attention. Cocktail hour transitioned to dinner service, my stomach tightening with each passing minute. Soon the toasts would begin, and with them, the unraveling of carefully constructed lies. Chelsea, recognizable from her social media photos, approached the gift table during what appeared to be a lull between dinner and dessert. She examined several packages, eventually selecting mine and carrying it to the head table, where my father and Vanessa sat surrounded by their wedding party. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could imagine Chelsea explaining the special delivery, perhaps embellishing with details about my supposed overseas work emergency and thoughtful planning. Vanessa accepted the package with a smile, untying the ribbon with the deliberate slowness of someone aware they were being watched by an appreciative audience. My father leaned toward her, his expression animated in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. They looked happy, content in their carefully curated reality. Until they weren't. I watched as Vanessa removed the envelope from its nest of tissue paper, her expression curious as she opened it. Her face changed as she examined the contents, confusion giving way to shock, then something harder to define. A complex mixture of hurt and anger that transformed her features. She turned to my father, showing him the papers and photo. His reaction was immediate and unmistakable, color draining from his face, body language shifting from relaxed celebration to rigid panic. Vanessa stood abruptly, saying something that caused guests at nearby tables to turn in surprise. My father reached for her arm, but she pulled away, now speaking loudly enough that her voice carried across the pavilion, though I couldn't make out specific words. The reception had ground to a halt, all attention focused on the unfolding drama at the head table. What happened next exceeded even my expectations for chaos. The pavilion doors opened to admit a latecomer, a woman I recognized immediately as Mariana, with Lucas holding her hand. Their appearance wasn't part of my plan, a development I hadn't anticipated or orchestrated. Yet there they were, walking directly toward the head table where my father stood frozen in apparent horror. Later, I would learn that Mariana had made her own decision after our meeting, concluding that passive revelation through documentation wasn't sufficient. She wanted Rick to face not just the abstract idea of his secret child, but the reality of Lucas himself, the boy whose existence he had reduced to monthly payments and legal distance. The confrontation that followed was both more contained and more devastating than anything I could have arranged. No shouting, no physical altercation, just Mariana introducing Lucas to a room full of strangers as Rick's son, and my father unable to deny the obvious genetic connection visible to everyone present. Vanessa, already reeling from the paternity test revelation, now faced the living embodiment of her new husband's deception on what should have been their happiest day. Guests whispered among themselves as resort security appeared, summoned by someone concerned about the unexpected disruption. Within minutes, Mariana and Lucas were being escorted from the pavilion. My father engaged in an intense, private conversation with Vanessa in a corner, and the wedding coordinator frantically attempting to salvage some semblance of celebration from the wreckage of exposed secrets. I left my observation post then, unsettled by the real-time consequences of my actions. The drive back to my motel passed in a blur of conflicting emotions, satisfaction mingled with an unexpected hollowness. I had achieved exactly what I intended. Perhaps more. My father's carefully constructed new life had been revealed as built on deception. Vanessa had learned the truth before fully committing her future to a man capable of such significant lies. And Lucas, though I hadn't intended his direct involvement, had been acknowledged publicly as a Lawson, impossible to relegate to the shadows any longer. Yet as I lay awake that night, replaying the scene in the pavilion, I found myself wondering about the nature of justice and whether what I had orchestrated truly qualified. Had I righted a wrong, or merely created new wreckage in the name of balancing old pain? The question remained unanswered as exhaustion finally pulled me into uneasy sleep. The aftermath unfolded gradually over subsequent days and weeks. According to my aunt, who called in a state of shocked disbelief the morning after the wedding, Vanessa had insisted on an immediate annulment, unwilling to begin a marriage with such a fundamental breach of trust. My father, apparently, had alternated between desperate attempts to salvage the relationship and furious demands to know who had sent the paternity information. He suspects someone from Mariana's side, my aunt reported, unaware of my involvement. He can't imagine who else would have known about Lucas or had access to the legal documents. The poor man is absolutely devastated, Lily. I know things have been difficult between you two, but seeing him like this. Oh. I murmured appropriate sympathetic noises, the hypocrisy of my response adding another layer to my complicated emotional state. The poor man had created this situation entirely through his own choices, his own deceptions. Yet hearing about his devastation brought me less satisfaction than I had anticipated. Social media provided additional glimpses into the fallout. Vanessa's accounts, previously filled with couple photos and wedding preparation updates, went suddenly private. When they reappeared 2 weeks later, all images of my father had been methodically removed, replaced with posts about healing journeys and trusting your intuition when red flags appear. Chelsea, the unwitting delivery mechanism for my revelation, posted a lengthy statement about being heartbroken for my best friend, shocked by the deception we all witnessed. My father's limited online presence disappeared entirely, his professional profile stripped to minimal information, his personal accounts deactivated. He became a digital ghost, retreating from the social world where his humiliation had been witnessed by dozens and was now being discussed by many more. More surprisingly, I received a friend request from Mariana, followed by a direct message once I accepted. I thought you should know that Rick has reached out about establishing a relationship with Lucas. Nothing formal yet, just supervised visits to see if they connect. Your gift forced a conversation that was years overdue. Thank you. The message left me with complicated feelings. I was genuinely glad for Lucas, who deserved to know his father regardless of the circumstances of his conception or the years of rejection. But I couldn't help wondering why my father would suddenly embrace parenthood with this child while continuing to exclude me from his life. The answer came 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, in the form of an email that landed in my inbox on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning. Lily, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now. I'm not sure what you know about recent events in my life, but things have changed significantly. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the choices I've made, the people I've hurt. You're at the top of that list. I understand if you want nothing to do with me anymore. But I'm hoping you might be willing to meet, just to talk. No expectations, no excuses, just a conversation that's long overdue. Your dad. I stared at those words, particularly that final identifier, your dad, which he had functionally abandoned years ago. Part of me wanted to delete the message immediately, deny him the response he sought. Another part, a fragment of the daughter who had once adored him unconditionally, felt a flicker of curiosity about what had prompted this belated attempt at reconnection. After 3 days of consideration, I replied with a single sentence. Coffee at Meridian Cafe, Thursday at 2 p.m. He was already waiting when I arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He had aged noticeably since I'd last seen him up close, new lines etched around his eyes and mouth, a certain heaviness to his posture that hadn't been there before. He stood when he saw me, an awkward half movement, as if unsure whether to attempt a hug or maintain formal distance. Lily, he said, his voice carrying a warmth I hadn't heard in years. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I took the seat across from him, neither accepting nor rejecting the emotional opening he offered. You said you wanted to talk. I'm here to listen. He nodded, accepting the boundaries I had established. I deserve that. The distance, the caution. I've given you every reason to doubt my sincerity. He pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. Still take it with cinnamon, no sugar? The fact that he remembered this detail, this small preference I had developed in high school, hit me with unexpected force. I nodded, taking the cup but not drinking immediately. I've made terrible mistakes, Lily, he continued after a moment. Choices I can't undo. Decisions that hurt people who deserved better. You most of all. Why now? I asked, the question that had been circling in my mind since receiving his email. You've had years to reach this conclusion. What changed? He looked down at his own untouched coffee. The obvious answer is Vanessa leaving, the wedding falling apart. But it's more than that. Seeing Lucas for the first time, recognizing myself in him immediately. It was like looking at your baby pictures again. This child I didn't know, but who was undeniably part of me. It made me confront how completely I had failed as a father, not once, but twice. 3 times, I corrected quietly. You weren't there for my graduation. That was the beginning of the end for us. Pain flashed across his features. You're right. I've been trying to reconstruct the timeline in therapy, understand how I went from the father I thought I was to what I became. That day, missing your graduation for a weekend trip with Vanessa. It was the first major promise I broke to you. Everything deteriorated from there. The mention of therapy surprised me. It didn't align with the image of my father I had constructed in recent years, the selfish man who prioritized his own desires above all else. You're in therapy? I asked. He nodded. Twice weekly since everything fell apart, trying to understand the choices I made. The patterns I followed. Why I was so desperate for Vanessa's approval that I abandoned my own child. Why I hid Lucas's existence instead of facing the consequences of my actions. Why I kept pushing you away when you were the best thing in my life. His voice broke on the last sentence, genuine emotion cracking through the composed exterior. In another time, I would have reached for his hand, offered comfort. Now, I simply waited, neither accepting his vulnerability nor rejecting it outright. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued after regaining his composure. I'm not even asking for it. What I did, systematically removing you from my life, it's not something that can be undone with apologies or explanations. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, that I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late for us. Why was it so easy? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally finding voice. To just stop being my father, to replace me with Vanessa, with her friends, with a whole new life that had no space for me in it. He flinched as if I had struck him physically. It wasn't easy, Lily. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I convinced myself it was necessary. That you were an adult with your own life. That the clean break was kinder than gradual distance. The truth, which I'm only now beginning to accept, is that I was terrified of disappointing you. Disappointing me? I repeated incredulously. By what metric was abandoning me less disappointing than whatever you were afraid of? It sounds irrational because it was, he admitted. I was going through something I couldn't name then. A kind of desperate grasping at youth. At near beginnings. Vanessa represented everything I thought I wanted. A life without responsibilities or history, or the constant reminder that I was aging, that my best years might be behind me. You, with your pain, graduation, and adult life beginning. You were a marker of time I wasn't ready to face. The explanation was both illuminating and infuriating. My existence had become inconvenient to his preferred narrative, a timeline he wished to rewrite without the complications of parenthood or aging. And Lucas? I pressed. How does he fit into this pattern? My father's expression shifted to something more complex, shame mingled with genuine regret. Lucas was the result of the worst decision I ever made. Vanessa and I had argued about commitment, about whether we had a future beyond just dating. We took what she called a pause while she decided if she wanted something serious with me. During that time, I met Mariana at a company event. She was young, interested in me. It was flattering in a way I couldn't resist. He paused, seemingly aware of how self-serving this narrative sounded. When Mariana told me she was pregnant, Vanessa and I had reconciled. I panicked. Offered financial support in exchange for discretion. It was cowardly and wrong. I told myself I was protecting everyone involved, but I was really just protecting myself, my relationship with Vanessa, the life I delio. thought I wanted. Did she know? I asked. Vanessa, I mean. Before the wedding? He shook his head. No. I convinced myself she never needed to know, that the child support payments were sufficient fulfillment of my obligations. When Mariana agreed to the arrangement, it seemed like the perfect solution. No messy explanations, no disruption to the narrative Vanessa and I had constructed. Until someone sent proof to your wedding, I observed, watching his face carefully. Yes, he agreed, no suspicion in his expression. I still don't know who arranged that particular revelation, though Mariana swears it wasn't her. Someone who knew about Lucas, who had access to the paternity test results. Who wanted to ensure Vanessa learned the truth in the most public, devastating way possible. I maintained neutral expression, neither confirming nor denying my involvement. And now? What happens now with Lucas? With Vanessa? Vanessa is gone for good, he said with resignation. She made it clear there's no coming back from this level of deception. As for Lucas, I'm trying to establish a relationship, slowly and on Mariana's terms. She's been remarkably gracious, given my behavior over the past 5 years. Lucas is an amazing kid, bright and curious. He looks so much like you did at that age. The comparison caught me off guard, a reminder of the genetic connection that bound us all together despite the emotional distances my father had created. And what about us? I asked, the question emerging more vulnerable than I intended. Where do I fit into this new version of your life? This attempt at redemption? My father looked directly at me then, his eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to reach beyond our immediate conversation. That's entirely up to you, Lily. I would like to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. If you're willing. I know I don't deserve another chance, and I won't pressure you. But I want you to know that door is open, whenever and however you might choose to walk through it. And we talked for another hour, covering ground that had been left untended for years. He asked about my job at the university archives, my friends, my apartment with genuine interest that reminded me painfully of the father he had once been. I found myself responding more fully than I had intended, sharing details of my life that I had previously protected from him, guarding against further rejection. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small wrapped package. I've been carrying this for weeks, hoping for an opportunity to give it to you. It's not a bribe or an attempt to buy forgiveness, just something I thought you should have. I accepted the package cautiously, unwrapping it to find a worn leather case containing a vintage watch I recognized immediately. It had belonged to my grandfather, a heritage piece that had always been intended to pass to me on my 21st birthday. The very birthday my father had missed during the early days of his relationship with Vanessa. I should have given this to you years ago, he said quietly. Another promise broken, but it's always been yours. The watch represented more than just a belated gift. It was an acknowledgement of continuity, a family connection that persisted despite his attempts to sever it. I closed the case without putting the watch on, tucking it into my bag with careful movements that helped mask my emotional response. Thank you, I said simply. I should go. Of course. He nodded, not pushing for more than I was ready to give. Thank you for listening, Lily. It means more than I can express. We parted with an awkward half-hug, a physical interaction that fell short of our former easy affection but represented more connection than I had allowed in years. As I walked away, I found myself wondering about the nature of revenge and resolution, whether the satisfaction I had briefly felt watching his wedding implode compared to this more complex emotional landscape we're now navigating. The following Sunday, I received a text message from an unknown number. Hi Lily, this is Mariana. Hope it's okay that your dad gave me your number. Lucas and I are going to the park this afternoon. And your dad will be there too. Lucas asked if his sister might come sometime. No pressure, just wanted to extend the invitation. We're usually there Sundays around 3. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decipher my own reaction to this unexpected development. Meeting Lucas would make everything more real, more concrete, than the abstract notion of a half-brother I had used to justify my actions. It would also inevitably bring me into more regular contact with my father, creating a family connection I wasn't sure I was ready to embrace. Yet the thought of Lucas asking about me, wanting to meet his sister, stirred something I hadn't anticipated. He was innocent in all of this, a child seeking connection with the family he had been denied. My revenge had been directed at my father and Vanessa, not at this 5-year-old boy who shared my blood and history. After 20 minutes of internal debate, I replied, "Thank you for the invitation. I'd like to meet Lucas. See you at the park at 3. The park was busy with weekend visitors when I arrived, families spread across the green spaces enjoying the mild weather. I spotted them easily, my father's tall figure standing near a playground where a small boy was navigating the monkey bars with determined concentration. Mariana sat on a nearby bench, watching with the alertness particular to parents of active children. I approached slowly, giving myself time to absorb the scene, to prepare for this strange new family configuration. Mariama noticed me first, raising a hand in greeting. My father turned, surprise and pleasure crossing his features as he recognized me. "Lily," he said as I reached them. "I didn't know you were coming today. Mariana invited me," I explained, nodding to her. "I hope that's okay." "More than okay," he assured me, a tentative smile forming. "Lucas has been asking about you since we told him he has a big sister." "He has?" The information touched something deep within me, a longing for family connection I had suppressed during years of estrangement. Mariana smiled, warmer than I expected given the circumstances of our previous interaction. "He's been full of questions. What you look like, what you do, if you like the same foods he does. 5-year-olds are very practical in their curiosity." As if summoned by our conversation, Lucas abandoned the monkey bars and ran toward us, slowing as he noticed the unfamiliar addition to his usual Sunday group. Up close, the resemblance to my father, to the Lawson family traits, was even more pronounced than in photos. Those amber eyes, so like my own, studied me with open curiosity. "Are you Lily?" he asked directly, no shyness in his approach. "My dad says you're my sister." The simple question, the easy acknowledgement of our relationship, caught me unprepared. "Yes, I'm Lily," I confirmed, kneeling to meet him at eye level. "Which makes me your big sister." Lucas considered this information seriously. "I never had a sister before. Do you like ice cream? Dad says we can get some after the park." The mundane question, so disconnected from the complex adult dynamics swirling around us, startled a genuine laugh from me. "I do like ice cream. Chocolate chip is my favorite." "Mine too," Lucas exclaimed, his entire face lighting up at this discovered commonality. "Dad likes boring vanilla. Mom likes the one with the cookies in it." "Cookies and cream," Mariana supplied with an indulgent smile. "Very sophisticated." Lucas turned back to the playground, then paused, looking at me over his shoulder. "Want to see how high I can swing? Dad says I'm getting really good at pumping my legs." The invitation was so simple, so untainted by the history that complicated my adult relationships. "I'd love to see that," I told him, rising to follow as he ran toward the swings. For the next hour, I existed in a strange bubble of normal family interaction, pushing Lucas on the swings, watching him navigate the slide, answering his endless questions about my life and preferences. My father and Mariana maintained a respectful distance, allowing us to establish our own connection without interference. When Lucas eventually tired, we gathered for the promised ice cream, sitting at a picnic table with our respective favorite flavors. The conversation remained deliberately light, focused on Lucas's interests and activities, carefully avoiding the complex circumstances that had brought us together. As the afternoon wound down, Lucas leaned against his mother, ice cream finished, and energy finally flagging. Will you come to the park next Sunday too? He asked me, a slight worry in his expression suggesting he feared this might be a one-time meeting. I glanced at Mariana, not wanting to overstep. She nodded slightly, indicating her approval of continuing contact. I'd like that. I told Lucas. Maybe we could bring a frisbee next time. I used to be pretty good at throwing one. Cool. Lucas's enthusiasm was immediate and unguarded. I've never tried that before. Will you teach me? Of course. I promised, feeling something shift within me, a softening toward this unexpected family connection that had emerged from my acts of revenge. As we prepared to leave, my father hung back slightly, creating a moment of private conversation while Mariana helped Lucas gather his things. Thank you for coming today, he said quietly. It means a lot to Lucas. And to me. I nodded, still uncertain about the evolving parameters of our relationship. He's a great kid. None of this is his fault. No, it isn't, my father agreed soberly. The mistakes were all mine. But maybe something good can come from them anyway, if we're willing to try. The question lingered unspoken between us. Was I willing to try? To move beyond revenge toward some form of reconciliation? I didn't have a clear answer yet, only the certainty that Lucas deserved a sister, regardless of the complicated history between the adults in his life. One Sunday at a time, I said finally. That's all I can promise right now. My father nodded, accepting these limited terms with visible gratitude. One Sunday at a time, he echoed. It's more than I deserve. In the weeks that followed, Sunday park meetings became a regular occurrence. Lucas and I established a genuine sibling bond, uncomplicated by the adult dynamics that had necessitated it. He taught me his favorite playground games. I introduced him to frisbee and basic soccer skills. We discovered shared preferences for chocolate chip ice cream, action movies with lots of explosions, and books about dinosaurs. My relationship with my father evolved more slowly. Constrained by years of hurt and betrayal that couldn't be erased through simple activities or shared ice cream. We maintained careful boundaries, focusing on Lucas as our common ground, gradually allowing small openings in the protective walls I had constructed. Mariana, surprisingly, became something of an ally in this complex family reconstruction. Her own history with my father had been painful. Yet she had found a way to move beyond bitterness for Lucas's sake, establishing a functional co-parenting relationship that prioritized their son's well-being. Her example offered a potential path forward, one that acknowledged past wounds without allowing them to determine future possibilities. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I found myself having dinner with my father at a restaurant halfway between our respective homes. It was our first one-on-one meeting since the coffee shop conversation. A deliberate step toward determining what our relationship might become without Lucas as buffer or focus. I've been wondering something, I said as our meals arrived, that day at your wedding, when everything fell apart. Did you ever figure out who sent the package? He shook his head, unaware of the significance of my question. No. Vanessa insisted it must have been someone from my past who knew about Lucas and wanted to punish me. The only people who had access to those particular documents were Mariana, her lawyer, and me. Mariana swears it wasn't her, and I believe her. She wouldn't have exposed Lucas to that kind of public scene. I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. It's strange how secrets have a way of emerging eventually. Like they want to be known, regardless of how carefully they're hidden. Yes, he agreed thoughtfully, though the timing and method suggest deliberate intention rather than random discovery. Someone wanted to ensure maximum impact, maximum humiliation. He paused, studying my face with sudden intensity. Do you know something about it, Willie? The direct question hung between us, an opportunity for confession or continued concealment. The truth would inevitably change whatever tentative reconciliation we had begun. Perhaps end it entirely. The lie would maintain our current trajectory, but build our future relationship on continued deception, a foundation as unstable as the one he had attempted with Vanessa. Yes, I admitted finally. I sent it. I arranged for the package to be delivered during your reception, to the open during the toasts for maximum effect. His expression registered shock, then confusion, then a dawning comprehension. You? But how did you even know about Lucas? About the paternity test? I explained a sequence of events that had led to my discovery. From the alumni records, to Dr. Patel's assistance with the genetic database search, to my meeting with Mariana. Throughout my account, my father remained silent, his face reflecting a complex progression of emotions. What? Why? He asked when I had finished. Why go to such lengths? Why not just confront me directly? Would you have listened? I countered. Would you have acknowledged Lucas? Told Vanessa the truth, if I had simply asked you to? Or would you have continued the pattern of dismissing me, pushing me further from your life to maintain the narrative you preferred? He had no immediate response to these questions, recognition flickering in his eyes that the answers would not reflect well on the man he had been 6 months earlier. I wanted you to feel what I felt. I continued into his silence. The public humiliation, the sense of being discarded for a more convenient truth. I wanted Vanessa to know exactly who she was marrying. And yes, I wanted revenge for all the birthdays you missed, the graduation you skipped, the coffee shop conversation where you relegated me to your past. My father absorbed these words, pain evident in his expression but no anger, no defensive rejection of my actions or motivations. I understand, he said finally. I don't like it, but I understand why. You felt driven to such measures. I gave you every reason to want to hurt me as I had hurt you. His acceptance surprised me. I had expected recrimination, accusations of deliberately destroying his happiness, demands to know how I could have exposed Lucas to potential emotional harm. Instead, he seemed to recognize the justice in what I had done, however harsh its execution. Would you do it again? He asked after a long moment. Knowing what you know now, seeing the consequences, would you still send that package? I considered the question carefully, weighing the satisfaction I had briefly felt against the complicated aftermath, the unexpected developments that had led us to this conversation. I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me still believes you and Vanessa deserved the truth, but continuing to hide Lucas's existence would have poisoned your marriage eventually anyway. But I didn't anticipate Mariana bringing Lucas to the reception. I never intended for him to be directly involved in the revelation. My father nodded, accepting this complicated answer. For what it's worth, I think you were right about one thing. The truth would have emerged eventually, in some form. Secrets that significant can't stay buried forever. And Vanessa deserved to know before committing her life to me. We ate in silence for several minutes, adjusting to this new layer of honesty between us. I had exposed my deliberate act of revenge. He had acknowledged its underlying justification. Neither confession erased the harm we had caused each other, but perhaps they created space for a more authentic relationship moving forward. Where does this leave us? I finally asked. Now that you know I deliberately sabotaged your wedding? My father considered the question with the careful attention it deserved. I think it leaves us exactly where we were yesterday, just with more truth between us. I'm still trying to be a better father than I was. You're still deciding how much of a relationship you want with me. Lucas still needs both of us in his life. The facts haven't changed, only our understanding of how we arrived at this point. His response reflected a maturity and perspective I hadn't expected, evidence perhaps of the therapy he had mentioned, or simply the hard-won wisdom that comes from confronting one's worst mistakes. I'm not sure I deserve such understanding, I admitted. What I did was calculated to cause maximum pain. And what I did to you over years was calculated to exclude you from my life entirely, he countered. If we're measuring deserving, Lily, I think the scales remain tipped heavily in your favor. As we finished our meal and prepared to part, my father reached across the table, not quite touching my hand but offering the possibility of connection. "Next Sunday at the park?" he asked, the question encompassing far more than a simple schedule confirmation. I nodded, accepting both the literal invitation and its deeper implications. "Next Sunday," I agreed. I promised Lucas I'd teach him how to skip stones on the pond. My father smiled, genuine warmth reaching his eyes. He's been talking about it all week. You've become quite the hero to him. "I'm just trying to be a good sister," I said, the role still new but increasingly comfortable. The kind I would have wanted if I'd known about him from the beginning. "You're succeeding," he assured me. "And maybe someday, you'll give me the chance to try again at being the kind of father you deserved all along." I didn't make any promises beyond the immediate future, the Sunday stone skipping lesson already scheduled. But as we walked to our separate cars, I felt a shifting within myself. A tentative openness to possibilities I had previously rejected entirely. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path that might eventually lead there. 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, I found myself in an unexpected position, helping Lucas prepare for his role as ring bearer in a small civil ceremony where my father would marry Mariana. The relationship that had begun with secret pregnancy and legal distance had evolved through co-parenting into genuine partnership, a foundation built on honesty and shared commitment to their son. Vanessa had moved across the country, according to social media, now engaged to a yoga instructor closer to her own age. My father had sold the house he had once shared with her, downsizing to a modest home with a backyard perfect for Lucas's energy, and the guest room that occasionally hosted me for weekend visits. "Do I look handsome?" Lucas asked, struggling with the clip-on tie that completed his miniature suit. At 6, he had grown taller, losing some of the baby softness in his face, the Lawson features becoming more pronounced with each passing month. "Very handsome," I assured him, kneeling to adjust the tie. "The most handsome ring bearer in the history of weddings." "Dad says I have to be super careful with the rings," he confided, his expression serious. "They're very important and expensive." "That's true," I agreed. "But you're excellent at important jobs. Remember how carefully you carried that bird's nest we found to show your science teacher? You didn't lose a single twig." Lucas brightened at this reminder of his previous success with delicate objects. "Yeah! I'm going to be just as careful with the rings. Maybe even more careful." My father appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple suit that reflected the ceremony's intimate nature. Just family and a few close friends would witness this wedding. A deliberate contrast to the elaborate celebration that had ended so disastrously a year earlier. "Look at you two," he said, genuine emotion in his voice. "My incredible children." Lucas ran to him for approval of his formal attire. "Lily says I look handsome." "Do you think so too, Dad?" "The handsomest boy I've ever seen," my father confirmed, lifting him for a quick hug before setting him carefully down to preserve the pressed appearance of his suit. "Why don't you go show Mom?" "She's in the kitchen with Grandma." As Lucas darted away, my father turned to me with more hesitant appreciation. "Thank you for helping him get ready. And for being here today. It means everything to have both my children at this wedding." I nodded, still sometimes uncomfortable with direct emotional exchanges despite our gradually improving relationship. Lucas would never have forgiven me if I'd missed his big moment as ring bearer. "And otherwise?" he asked carefully. "How are you feeling about today?" The question acknowledged the complex emotions that might accompany witnessing my father marry someone who wasn't my mother, someone who had entered his life through circumstances that had initially excluded me entirely. "I'm happy for you," I said with genuine sincerity. "For all of you. You, Mariana, and Lucas, deserve this official recognition of the family you've become." Relief softened his features. "We want you to feel included in that family, Lily. In whatever way feels right to you, on whatever timeline works. No pressure, just open invitation." The offer touched me deeply, more meaningful for its patient acceptance of my continued caution, my slow steps toward reconciliation. "I'm getting there," I told him honestly. "One Sunday at a time, remember?" "One Sunday at a time." He agreed, the phrase having evolved from tentative boundary to affectionate family motto. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Conducted by a judge in the garden of my father's new home. Lucas performed his ring-bearer duties with exaggerated care, concentrating so intently on the small pillow holding the rings that several guests stifled affectionate laughter. Mariana looked beautiful in a simple cream dress. Her vows focused on creating family rather than traditional promises of obedience or service. My father, speaking his own vows with visible emotion, included an unexpected acknowledgement. "I bring to this marriage not just my love and commitment, but the wisdom gained through failure and redemption. I promise to honor the truth above convenience, to value family above appearance, and to recognize that love multiplies rather than divides when shared authentically." The words weren't directed specifically at me, yet I felt their intention, their recognition of the path that had led us all to this moment. A path that included my deliberate act of revenge, which had ultimately forced confrontation with essential truths that might otherwise have remained buried. During the small reception that followed, as Lucas proudly circulated with a tray of hors d'oeuvres nearly too heavy for his determined grip, Mariana found a moment to speak with me privately. "I wanted to thank you," she said, surprising me with her directness. "For what?" I asked, genuinely unsure what she meant. "For sending that package to the first wedding," she clarified, lowering her voice to ensure privacy. "Your father told me it was you, that you had discovered Lucas through university records and decided Vanessa deserved to know the truth before marrying him." I tensed, uncertain how she felt about my interference, my use of her son's existence as a weapon of revenge. "I didn't intend for Lucas to be there that day," I said quickly. "I never wanted him directly involved." "I know," she assured me. "That was my decision, made independently after meeting you. And it was probably unfair to Lucas, exposing him to that situation. But the result, however messy the process, has been transformative for all of us. Your father became the man he should have been all along, partly because you forced him to confront his worst decisions." Her perspective surprised me, this generous interpretation of actions I had undertaken from far less noble motivations. "I wasn't thinking about transformation," I admitted. "I just wanted him to hurt like I had hurt." Mariana nodded, understanding in her expression. "Most significant changes begin with pain, with disruption of comfortable patterns. Your father needed that disruption, even if none of us would have chosen its specific form." As she rejoined my father near the small wedding cake they would soon cut together, I found myself reflecting on the strange, circuitous path that had led us all to this moment. The revenge I had so carefully planned had indeed caused the pain and humiliation I intended, but it had also catalyzed a series of transformations I could never have anticipated. My father's confrontation with his worst qualities and commitment to change Mariana's evolution from secret inconvenience to cherished partner, Lucas's emergence from hidden child to acknowledged son and brother, and my own journey from bitter exclusion to tentative inclusion in this reconfigured family. The moral complexity of these outcomes defied simple categorization. My actions had been motivated by hurt and anger, a desire to inflict pain rather than promote healing. Yet healing had occurred anyway, not because of my intentions, but despite them, through the individual and collective choices made in response to the truth I had so dramatically revealed. As I watched my father, Mariana, and Lucas pose for a family photo, their genuine happiness evident in relaxed smiles and natural poses, I considered whether to join them when inevitably invited. A year ago, I would have refused outright, maintaining the distance I had cultivated as protection against further rejection. 6 months ago, I would have agreed reluctantly, still guarding against full emotional investment in this new family configuration. Today, when Lucas spotted me watching and called, "Lily, you have to be in the family picture too." I moved forward without hesitation, taking my place beside my half-brother, accepting my father's arm around my shoulders with only minimal tension. The photographer counted down, capturing the moment. Not a perfect family by conventional standards, but an authentic one, forged through conflict and reconciliation, secret and revelation, revenge and bow. And forgiveness. A family still in process, still healing, still discovering the boundaries and possibilities of our connections to one another. As we dispersed after the photo, Lucas slipped his small hand into mine. "Are you staying for cake?" he asked, the question containing his perpetual worry that I might leave before he was ready for me to go. "Of course," I assured him, squeezing his hand gently. "I wouldn't miss cake with my favorite brother. I'm your only brother," he reminded me with the literal precision particular to 6-year-olds, "so I have to be your favorite." "True," I acknowledged. "But you'd be my favorite even if I had 100 brothers." This declaration satisfied him completely, his face breaking into the wide, unguarded smile that had become one of my favorite sights over the past year. In that moment, watching his uncomplicated joy, I felt a surge of gratitude that transcended the complicated circumstances of our introduction. Whatever my initial motivations for revealing his existence, the resulting relationship with this remarkable child had become one of the most precious elements of my life. Later, as the small gathering began to disperse, my father found me gathering my belongings, preparing for the drive back to my apartment. "Thank you again for being here," he said. "It meant everything to have you participate, to have both my children witness this new beginning." I nodded, more comfortable now with these emotional exchanges than I had been months earlier. It was a lovely ceremony. Simple, honest, focused on what matters. Exactly what we wanted, he agreed. "So different from... he trailed off, not needing to specify the contrast with his previous wedding attempt. "Sometimes things work out as they should," I offered, "even when the path getting there is messy." My father studied me with the thoughtful attention that had characterized our rebuilding relationship. "Are you at peace with it now? With what happened? With your role in it?" The question deserved careful consideration. Was I at peace with my deliberate act of revenge, with its intended and unintended consequences? The answer wasn't simple, couldn't be reduced to either satisfaction or regret. "I'm at peace with where we've all ended up," I said finally. "You with Mariana, Lucas with a full acknowledgement of his place in the family, me finding my way back into connection with you and discovering a brother I never knew I needed. The methods weren't exactly ethical, but the results seem right somehow." My father accepted this nuanced response with a slight nod. Life rarely offers perfect solutions or clean moral lines. We do our best with the information and emotions we have at the time, then try to grow from the outcomes, whatever they may be. This philosophical perspective represented a significant evolution from the man who had once abandoned his adult daughter to pursue a relationship unburdened by parental responsibility. It reflected genuine growth, hard-won wisdom that gave me hope for our continued relationship. "One Sunday at a time," I reminded him, using our family motto to acknowledge both how far we had come and the continued journey ahead. "One Sunday at a time," he echoed, offering a brief embrace that I returned without the stiffness that would have characterized such contact months earlier. As I drove away from the small family celebration, I reflected on the strange symmetry of our situation. 1 year ago, I had observed my father's failed wedding from a distance, watching through binoculars as my carefully orchestrated revenge unfolded. Today, I had participated directly in a successful ceremony, not as architect of chaos, but as supportive family member. The transformation was not complete, might never be. Trust once broken rebuilds slowly, if at all. But we were moving forward, creating a new reality from the wreckage of old deceptions and bitter revelations. Not because revenge had directly created healing, but because truth, however painfully delivered, had created space for authentic choices that previously seemed impossible. I had sent a gift that ruined my father's wedding, motivated by hurt and anger accumulated through years of rejection. The chaos that followed had been exactly what I intended. The pain inflicted precisely targeted. What I hadn't anticipated was how destruction could create space for reconstruction, how endings could enable beginnings, how revenge could inadvertently open pathways to reconciliation. One Sunday at a time, we continued forward, a family redefined by crisis and choice, by harm and healing, by the messy, complicated work of human connection that follows when secrets are exposed and truth, however difficult, becomes the foundation for whatever comes next.